Well, welcome here to worship. My name's Jeff, and I'm the pastor here, and it's my privilege to work with a group of great people, great musicians, great tech folks, and people working with children and a whole deal. And it's my privilege just to work with an incredible group of Christ followers here at Phos Community Church who are trying to figure out what it is to follow Jesus all the time in all ways and where we're headed. And I really want to just do that well with you. Well, I need about 4th to 8th graders to come on stage. Just real quickly, you guys, I need 5 of you to come up here. Just run, just come on. Give me 5. Here's 1. Okay. It's my favorite youngest son. This is Caleb. Okay. 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Come on. I think we got enough for you. Come on. Well, you guys slide across here. Caleb, come right over here. All right. Here we go. All right. Thank you, sir. Now, this is what I'm convinced of. Actually, I'm going to tell you what's going on. Today's message is about Christian students' rights in the public school. Now, let me be careful. I'm going to tell you where I'm not going, and this will help you. We're not going to Westboro Baptist. Okay, so if you know who they are, we're not getting anywhere close to that. So go ahead and relax. Take a deep breath. It's going to be okay. And then we'll go from there. Caleb, help me out here. Put these on, if you will. Okay. And then, tell you what. Yeah, I'll tell you what. Put those on for me right there. Yeah, those right there. Okay. No, I got them, babe. I got them. Thank you. All right. Olivia, let's see. Let's get this worked out here. Put those on. Okay. You put the, well, no, I'll tell you what. You put those on. You put these on. Okay. All right. Now, you put those on. All right, now let's talk a little bit about what happens here. What do those do to you?
I can hardly see anything.
Can hardly see anything. Good. Yeah. What about these? What do they do?
Everything's fuzzy.
Everything's fuzzy because those are somebody else in my house's glasses that help her see up close. Yeah, not mine though. Okay.
It looks really cloudy.
Show me kind of those are star glasses. Show us your superstar pose. I know you can do this. Show me a superstar pose. There we go. Okay, that'll work. And how about you? What do you see?
Not very far, and it's cloudy.
It's cloudy. Others are kind of nasty. And what about these? What do you?
I can only see lines.
Can only see lines. What? You know what those are shaped like? Crosses. Yeah, kind of cross-shaped glasses. Okay. Now you already had glasses on. So what do your glasses help you do?
They help me see clearly.
Help you see clearly. Okay. And when you don't have them on, how do you see?
It's really fuzzy, and I can't see everyone.
And it gets tougher.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. How about these glasses? What do they do?
Everything's like fuzzy.
Everything's fuzzy. Those are my glasses. They're prescription sunglasses, and they're really strong. And so she's probably going to be cross-eyed when she gets done with this because these different glasses, they give you a different worldview, right? You see differently out of different glasses. If you wear different things, you see differently. And today we're going to talk about some worldviews, different ways people see life and what they go through. And so what I hope winds up happening is that we all leave here kind of a cross-shaped, Christ-centered worldview, that we leave a little bit closer to seeing the world through the eyes and the lens of Jesus Christ and not through some blurry glasses that belong to somebody else. And I hope we see clearly like you do because your glasses, your prescription fits you well. That's a good thing to have. So, all right. So today, talking about worldviews, okay? So, children, let me ask you something. Would you agree that different people see the world different ways? Yeah, different people have something over their heart, almost like sunglasses, so they see the world in different ways. Now, when a person sees the world in a different way than you do you have to be mean to them? No, but you can listen to them, can't you?
Yes.
Okay. So if somebody sees the world different than you, can you still have a conversation with them?
Yeah.
Could they still be your friend?
Yeah.
Yeah. Could you figure out how to have a conversation with them?
Yeah.
What if they really don't like Jesus at all? Could you still have a conversation with them? What do you think? Could you still have a conversation with them?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Can.
You could still figure out how to do that, right? What grade are you in?
5th.
Hope we'll all be smart as a 5th grader when we leave. Okay, it'll be good. Okay, so guys, grab those glasses, put them on the table. Thank you so much. Some of the children and the teenagers have joined us today for worship because of this topic. It's an important day, special topic, and I wanted them to be there. So kids, thanks for coming up. Give it up for them. And I'm going to ask Mr. Andy Moore to come up with me. Andy is a elementary school principal here at Locust Grove Elementary, and Andy is a Christ follower, first of all. Andy worked with me when I was a youth minister at Crestwood Baptist and did an amazing job with our students there, has a background working in youth camps and different places. But now, and some of your students are here. And some of your teachers, some of your staff is here. And so, Andy, why don't you introduce yourself just a little bit? I told him something about you, but tell us a little bit about your background, then we'll dive into this topic.
How far back?
Well, just the past, maybe 10, 15 years, where you came from. And that kind
All right. I guess maybe I'll start at the University of Kentucky. That seems a relevant
there we go.
place to start. A lot of paths crossed for me there. Number one is where I truly, as an adult, began to truly follow Christ. I grew up in a Christian home, was very blessed that I had godly parents that saw the importance of teaching me who Christ was and leading me that direction. But it wasn't really until I went to UK and got involved in the Baptist student ministries there that I really figured out what it meant as an adult to personally pursue that relationship. Through the Baptist Student Union there, I met my wife, Paula, who will be joining us here at the 11 o'clock service, but she is also a counselor here in Oldham County at Kenwood Station. We have had 3 children over the last 10 years. I've got a 10-year-old Jackson, who's a 5th grader at Locust Grove. I've got an 8-year-old Caleb, who is a 3rd grader at Kenwood Station. And then I've got a 2-year-old who looks like a kindergartner, but really is only about 2. He's a bruiser. But we've been involved. We came and were involved in Crestwood Baptist for a number of years. Currently we go to Northeast Christian, and both of us are very active in different components there with church leadership. So it's just kind of where we've been the last several years.
Thanks for joining us today and for being a part. And Andy's son also plays baseball with Caleb, so that's kind of how he got here. We were just talking about this, and I invited him to come and help me. Let me set the framework a little bit more. Not only are we not Westboro Baptist, but we are Phos. Phos, we chose a name because Phos is the Greek word for light. And light means for us, it meant for us that light goes and light travels, and light doesn't just hang out in its own dark space, but light penetrates culture and goes throughout the world and makes a difference. Light changes things. And so we chose that as a metaphor to remind us who we are and what light does. Also, there's an underpinning in my own spirit about Phos, and it comes from a saying of a group of relief workers and godly men called the Christophers. And the Christophers' motto is, it's better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. Better to light a candle than to curse the darkness. So that's where we work from. It's better to get out and get engaged and get involved. We're a culture in our church, a culture of engagement. We're not drawing back from culture. We're not hiding from culture. We're in the middle of culture, not to be just like the culture, but to transform the culture by bringing light into it. Salt and light. Jesus said we would be salt and light, right? So we're a culture of engagement, of salt and light, of being right in the middle of being ambassadors for Jesus Christ. And that's why it's important that some of the things that we do, the reason we do some of the things we do is, for instance, Laura Cochran coaching soccer, or not soccer, but field hockey over at South Oldham High School. Vitally important to be right in the middle of that culture. I'm helping with the sports programs at Oldham County High School. Again, want to be right in the middle of culture and be right in the middle of where things are, because if we don't get there, then we can't make a difference, can we? Well, we can try. And what's been tried by the church for a long time was to stand outside of the culture and just yell at it with a bullhorn. Y'all are going to hell! It's not working out too good. It's not been the play that's worked so good. Now, that may be true, but there's a different way to get at it. And part of it is to roll up our sleeves and to get in the middle of culture and to create relationships and build bridges and have discussions. Does it make sense? So this is kind of the stance I'm going to work from on this, and so you know kind of how we operate as a church and where we intend to go. So we're going to talk about some scenarios about Christian students in public schools. Now, if you go to a private school, that's fine, but this is an important topic for those who attend public schools. And teachers, I'm not going to get too much into your end of things. Just go ahead and preface that. It's going to be mostly about students today. Teachers, you have a little bit different setup. Now, here's the complicated thing for people like Andy and our schools. There are a lot of different worldviews out here, right? How many of you guys would admit that Oldham County has changed? If you've been here for more than 10 years, have you seen a shift in Oldham County in the numbers of different kinds of people, languages, cultures, religions, colors of skin, all kinds of things? We are changing. We're becoming more pluralistic. Now, it complicates things. When America was all white, all one thing, and I mean mostly white, and we all shared this idea around the thing, mostly about a Protestant kind of faith, at least in this region. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. It gets more complicated now, doesn't it? It gets more complicated as things change. Other people move in. Other worldviews come into play. The public school has to take care of all those different kinds of students. They can't play to just one set of students, right? They got to be across the board. So the United States government, nor its entities, things like public schools, they can't make a law causing you to have to worship one way or the other. They give you freedom of religion, and they also give you freedom of expression. But not only do they give that to you as a Christian student, they also give it to the person that sits in class with you who doesn't believe in Jesus. They give it to both. Equal rights, equal freedom. And so that's the context, and that's what schools have to do as a public entity. And that's what even administrators like Andy, as a Christ follower who believes in Jesus dearly and follows him with his whole heart, has to balance that tension all the time. You want to talk to us about that tension, and I'll dive into some scenarios, what it's like to sit in your chair and manage some of all that's coming at you.
Certainly. In my role, and even I consider myself a teacher first and foremost. I just wear a different hat when I'm teaching at school on a weekly basis. But we always have, Jeff talked about worldviews. We always have our lens that we see things through. And I certainly think that my worldview allows me to hopefully see people for who they are and what they bring to a given situation. You know, when parents bring their children to our school, they're sending us the very best that they have. And I've yet to really see too many parents that aren't extremely prideful of their children, regardless of how successful or not successful that they are. And so I have to handle that with respect and honor and dignity in every exchange that I'm dealing with them, whether it's a discipline situation or whether I'm calling to give them some praise and accolades over something amazing that they've done. And we're just really called to see their kids and people for who they are, and just to live consistent and be very consistent in who we are, and know that there are at any given time hundreds, if not thousands, of people that are kind of watching us how we live our life.
Yeah, and so at the end of the day, you can't tell a student to pray one way or the other, but you can ensure space that all faiths, the students themselves can pray. But you might not bring, for instance, Caleb, if you went to your school, you might not invite him in to say a Christian prayer before school every morning, because then you've got a bunch of other students and faiths sitting there that aren't agreeing with that. Now, let me give you another preface. This is something that I work from. I've heard it said a lot of times that America started going downhill when we took prayer out of schools. Prayer is not out of schools. As long as teachers continue to give tests, there will be prayer in schools. Okay? And until that stops, students are always going to pray. They may just not be praying over the PA system. And honestly, as we move into the culture where we are, unless you're willing to allow the prayer one day to be a Christian prayer, and the prayer the next day to be a Muslim prayer, and the prayer the next day to be a Jewish prayer, and the prayer the next day to be from someone who has no faith, and a prayer for the next day from somebody that's a Wicca or Wiccan, unless you're willing to allow all those expressions, our government can't mandate that. So unless you want to uncork the genie and let them all out, and every time your child walks into the school have all these different faiths confronting them, we need to exercise our rights as Christ followers, but we need to do it in our own space. So let's go into some scenarios. Let's talk about this for a little bit. All right, here's a real life scenario. Happened to one of our students this year. A kindergarten student asked her mom why they don't say the Pledge of Allegiance or pray in her elementary school. The child comes from a Christian home and attended a Christian preschool. Talk to us about that.
Well, the Pledge of Allegiance is something that is, most people take it's a very patriotic, and they believe that, the founding fathers founded our nation. Regardless of whether or not which direction you believe the founding fathers, most of them were deist at heart, meaning that they believed in a God. And so most of our schools, I believe all of them in Oldham County, still say the pledge, but some of them may or may not, and there's just not much intention behind a lot of that. As far as the prayer goes, kind of like Jeff was saying, we would be remiss to force that upon us, because then we would have a lot of other worldviews that would be thrown at our students that we may or may not want being thrown that direction. And I believe, in Scripture, it talks about how prayer is very much supposed to be something that's done in private. It's not necessarily, it's a conversation between you and God, and it's not necessarily something that is supposed to always go before God. It often can come across as boasting and things like that, but it's supposed to be that personal, conversation.
But now, that same kindergarten student, could at her table at lunch, she could say her own prayer, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
And she could even invite some of her friends. Say, do you want me to pray with you, or would you pray with me? She could invite them, and as long as she's leading that and not disrupting the environment of the school, she can lead her own prayer with her own friends if she wants to.
Absolutely. I had a unique experience about 8 years ago with a class that I taught, and those students are now freshmen. Many of them are at Western and UK, and each day, this group of it was 6 young boys, they would go to their table at lunch, and they would wait for each other to all sit, whether or not they were buying their lunch or whether or not they brought their lunch. And those boys would pray openly with each other at lunch. And so that is a freedom. And one of the things that was really unique about that is that by the end of the school year, that entire class of mine would wait until everybody got to the table before they would start lunch, and they would have prayer. Not everybody prayed, but it just became one of those things where it was very much connected, and I had zero to do with that.
And the reality was, as a teacher, you couldn't have anything to do. You couldn't gather them and say, "Hey, we're going to pray now." Because you're paid by the state, you're seen as an agent of the government at that level. You can't impose or enforce that, but nor can you stop it if it's student-led.
Correct. Yeah.
And they're not disruptive. Now, if they were disrupting the middle of your classroom, you're teaching that, you can stop that, and probably should, because your students are there to learn. But you get this, Christian students, you have the right to pray. You can pray, and you can talk about God, and you can talk to your friends about God. And matter of fact, it would be really interesting to see if some of you students, some of you maybe that were brought up on stage, and some of the rest of you, if you were bold enough at school this coming week just to simply bow your head before your meal yourself, or maybe a step more, and you invite a friend or two, say, "Man, would you like to pray with me, or could I pray for a meal with you?" It would make a huge difference. That kind of prayer is always welcome, always allowed, always in bounds. You can still pray in your school. Your school just can't mandate how you pray. All right, let's go to a different one. Let's see. A middle school student says, "God bless you," to a fellow student who sneezed in class and was reprimanded by her teacher, who said, "There is no God speak aloud in my classroom." You can't do that in here.
No. Unfortunately, in a situation like that, the teacher misspoke. The ACLU, the American Civil Liberties Union, while we often hear them coming at us from another angle, they're also there to protect the rights of Christians and protect the rights of everybody. And they would firmly stand up and say that that student, with their freedom of expression, was well within their rights to say that. Now, the only caveat to that would have been in the midst of teachers lecturing, the discussions going on, and the student just stands up and yells and blurts it out, and it's disruptive to class. There's certainly some tolerance within that.
Yeah, part of it's about the motive of the student. If the student was
Absolutely.
sincere and they weren't trying to disrupt things, then it's perfectly in bounds.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. Cool. Then this one. This one happened to me, and this is real personal to me. All right. So I'm going to tell you about a failure of mine. Our daughter, elementary school student, she was at Crestwood Elementary, and great staff, great teachers, great people. Let me just preface everything I'm going to say with that. But when she was 4th or 5th grade, she was in a class where she was asked to develop a website. And the students were told, you can pick any topic you want. So Evelyn, passionate about her relationship with Jesus, she wanted to do Evelyn's What About God website. And it was going to be really cool. And she had all these plans for it. Well, she took her plans back to school. And the teacher told her, "You can't have that for your topic." And yet there were people talking about all kinds of things on their websites. And I thought about it, but I didn't go to the school and challenge that. That was a failure on my part. And I'm telling you, so part of this is born out of some pain and some regret and some failure on my part, that I didn't stand my ground at that point because I knew the teacher was out of line. If you could talk about your dog, then you can talk about your God. Okay? If you can talk about your boyfriend, then you can talk about your girlfriend. If you can talk about your sports team, you can talk about Jesus. Does this make sense? And I blew it. And because I blew it, we became a little less free as a country. And because I didn't stand my ground there, we lost a little bit of ground as a kingdom of God. Because I didn't stand up and say, this isn't right. She really can do this. And go and exercise my rights as a Christ follower and help her stand on her rights as a Christ follower in the school. So I'm telling you, parents, come see me. If you're struggling with this, we'll talk. Because I blew it, I believe. Talk to me about that website there.
Again, it's the same thing as the the previous. God bless you. It all comes down to freedom of expression. And, when teachers assign things, there are, typically set standards, set expectations for a given assignment. And for that particular one, the student was learning technology and how to set up a website. Now, if there were no other parameters on the subject or on that topic level, if they weren't supposed to cover something in social studies or science or math, and they were given kind of free range to select their topic, then at that point that student had the right to kind of choose and say, hey, I want to do this, and I'm going to be able to demonstrate that I can set up a website, that I can put the appropriate links, do all of the necessary things in order to meet the rubric and the criterion set forth in that assignment. Again, that's that freedom of expression component. And, and for my role as principal, anytime I encounter situations like that, I use them as teaching moments, to make sure that teachers know, this is kind of where the boundary exists. And we do have things kind of on the other side that we have to honor those as well.
Yeah. So, if we had a student who from a different faith background said, hey, I want to do mine what about Allah, then we pretty well have to allow that too. If we're going to allow those expressions on, unless, like you said, they're outside the topics that you were supposed to choose from, then it's got to be equal footing. And that's the challenge for us as Christ followers. We have, in my opinion, the greatest country ever. We have the most freedoms of any country in the world. But we will lose them if we don't stand and move them gently forward. Does this make sense? If we don't stay engaged, if we don't stand our ground peacefully, quietly, and go, then we'll have some challenges. Here's an interesting one. This happened at a local high school last year, or maybe 2 years ago. Students were given the assignment just to deliver a speech. It was in a speech class or a writing class or something, and it was a persuasive speech. And a student stood and he delivered a speech that basically said there is no God. Basically preached atheism to a classroom of students. He received a standing ovation from the teacher and the students. God's not dead. Which, by the way, turns out to be a great movie. I thought it would be totally bad, but I've watched it twice this week. It's really good. Talk to me about that, man. What about this situation here? This student stands, delivers this rousing speech, there is no God, and the class gives him a standing ovation. Some Christian students in the class are just freaked out a little bit.
Man, I would just go to God in prayer if I'm those students sitting there. First off, as a principal, I hope that I would never have, a teacher stand and applaud alongside that. But I hope that they would remain neutral in that either way, and that they could look at that speech from our point as objectively, did it accomplish what it was supposed to? But as a Christ follower, I would be torn. I would be brokenhearted. But the kind of the greatest thing that we have is just to go to God, and I think that that standing ovation, that speech probably opened up one of the greatest doors, and you've got to see the gift out of each of those things and see each of those opportunities. And I would have looked at it as an opportunity to, whether or not they were, 25, 30 people, however many people they were standing up, I'd have said, I now have 25 people by name that I need to be praying for, that God would reveal himself in a mighty way. Mm-hmm. But again, that right, that freedom of expression is protected, and it hurts sometimes. But I think that's got to fuel our fire to pray and to seek God and to see our mission field that He's laid before us.
Yeah, and, you know, if I was a student in that class, I certainly have the right, if I've not delivered my paper yet, to go home that night and rewrite my paper, don't I? Yeah. And to do a counter punch. I can do that. As a Christian student, this is what I'm trying to say to you, Christian students, you have rights. You don't lose your rights at the schoolhouse door. You still have the right of freedom of expression, of freedom of speech, but you don't have the right to disrupt the classroom environment or the school environment. But you can still pray, you can still speak your mind, you can still talk about Jesus, you can still invite your friends to church, you can still give them information. If Laura gives you a flyer about something happening in the youth group, you can still give that to your friends at church or at school. You can do all these things. They're all legal, they're all fair, and if somebody challenges you on that, simply come back to your parents or back to me or to Laura, and we'll help you sort through it, okay? And we'll help you know what you can do and maybe what's happening. But don't back down. Now, here's the challenge. That what happened at that high school, Andy, I don't think was just about the high school or that student. This is what I think, to your point. Church, the church in America, the reason that student believes there is no God is because probably nobody ever befriended his parents and told them about Jesus and invited them to know about Jesus and to learn and to grow. Does this make sense? It's a failure of the church in America to do our job to reach people and to share with them the good news of Jesus in a way that they can hear. We got to get our job done. So parents, adults, this isn't just about students. This is about us. And so, therefore, our church is committed to being in the community. I know the student that delivered the speech. He's a friend of mine. I'm hopeful that in time I'll be able to share with him about Jesus. But I can't do it if I don't know him, and I can't do it if I'm not engaged, if I'm not there. So Christians, adults, we have to stay engaged with real people in the real world and look for opportunities to share this faith and keep moving the gospel forward. Make sense? But if we as the body of Christ continue to shrink back and continue to give up territory, we're going to have more and more of these kinds of stories. Similar story happened. Fellowship of Christian Athletes, the organization had some meetings before school, and they started putting up signs around their school that about their meetings and about some different things. There were some atheist students who got fairly organized around this, and they started writing on those signs, basically saying, "Shut up, Christians, go back to your caves," or whatever, and different things, writing on those signs. There became a little bit of a war in the school between the atheist group and some Christian students. What about that?
Well, you know, this one, there's a lot of precedent for things like this, even though maybe not the specific case, because in the event that a select student group or even random students choose to start writing or vandalizing, there is, you know, in the student code of conduct, there is clearly laid out steps for course of action as far as discipline goes. And in my opinion, if a group of students, be it albeit organized, or a group of random students, then I would have the ability, you know, as a building principal, to hand out whatever disciplinary action I deemed necessary in that case. The slippery slope exists, though, in that I've got to make sure that it doesn't come across as if I am targeting a group, because if that group then comes up to me and says, well, we want to organize formally as a student group and post things, then I've got to, you know, allow them the opportunity. But, you know, it's this whole idea of disrupting the school day. Unfortunately, if there's too much of this that goes back and forth, whether or not it's banter, and hopefully the Christian, you know, the FCA group wouldn't, you know, step to that same level and remove their signs and do things like that. But that ultimately, that would end up being in a removal of all of them. So I certainly would be sensitive to how I handle the situation to make sure to clearly communicate to both, you know, sides of the aisle, you know, kind of where the rule is and what it is. But it is unfortunate that all too often the building administration just has that knee-jerk reaction and says, well, it's all gone. And that's unfortunate a lot of times.
You know, as our students grow up, guys, you're entering a world where a lot of people don't see the world the way we do as Christ followers. They see it differently. And they're going to begin to challenge you some in that. That's not a bad thing. If it causes you to grow some muscle and to choose to follow Jesus in spite of that can be actually a good thing. You know, so to Andy's point about the school, if the school allows any group to meet, chess club, speech club, debate club, whatever, something that's extracurricular, And then there's, if they allow any kind of faith club to meet, then there can be Christian organizations, but there can also be Buddhist organizations and atheist organizations, and they all have the same rights to post in those schools. We don't get more rights as Christ followers, but here's the news. Listen to me. You don't get less rights either. And I think the challenge right now is that we've bought the lie that you have less rights as a Christ follower than other students. You don't. You have the same or more. Okay? True?
Absolutely.
All right. I've got to cover this last one real quick. An elementary school sends assignments home with a primary school child related to Hanukkah, Kwanzaa, and some Santa Claus stuff. But nothing comes home about Christmas having Christ-centered origins. The Christian parent is upset and approaches the teacher asking to have Christian matter included in homework assignments alongside the faith expressions of all those other things. But is told that this is against the law and Christianity is off limits.
See reply to...
Yeah.
You know, it's all about freedom of expression, and Christmas is actually one of the more dangerous ones because it is widely accepted as kind of the American. You know, it is very much an Americanized holiday, and believers, non-believers alike, all celebrate this holiday, and actually believers of other faiths celebrate a Christmas holiday simply because it's kind of the culture thing, Santa Claus and things like that. So we've got to be careful. And I would venture to say in most schools, we overstep that bounds on the Christmas thing about 95% of the time. And so we still technically get away with a whole lot more than we could if anybody really wanted to push that envelope. But it's one of the more socially accepted things to chat about, to talk about. But again, you know, you've got, and I don't know how many world celebrations there are, you know, starting in December all around that hover around the new year. But there's a lot of them out there, and we can't be, we're either got to cover them all or we're remiss in our efforts to cover a few of them.
Right. You can't just cover Christianity probably because that's a favoritism. But what I see happening so many times right now, Andy, is that we're not covering Christianity at all because we think, oh, that's not legal or allowed, and we can cover all these other things. So what I'm looking for is to set the balance back and say, you know, Christians, we have the same rights. You have the right to learn about Christ and Christmas as well as about Kwanzaa and Hanukkah and whatever else. Andy, thanks so much for joining us today. I appreciate you a ton. Thanks for being here. Awesome, man. Thank you. All right. Now, I'm going to fly through some stuff. Let's start with this first one about rights. This thing that we'll put on the screen. We'll talk to you about rights for a second. Now, let's go to the next screen right away because I got to fly. You have rights as a Christian student. You know that. But you don't have the right to do everything that you want to do all the time. You can't disrupt the environment. But let's talk about what your rights are. All right? And here's the basic idea. Students do not lose their rights once they enter the school, but they may not disrupt the learning environment. That's the key to your rights. You have the right to speak as an American, to have freedom of expression, freedom of religion, but you can't disrupt the learning environment. That's your rights. Okay, you get that? But I want to remind you of some of your responsibilities as a Christ follower. Let's talk about these responsibilities of Christ followers. All right. 2 Timothy 4:2 says, "Preach the good news. Be ready at all times to tell people what they need to do. Tell them when they are wrong. Encourage them with great patience and careful teaching. Be ready at all times to tell people the reason for your faith." 2 Corinthians 5:20 says this, "Therefore, we are ambassadors for Christ, God making his appeal through us. We implore you on behalf of Christ, be reconciled to God." And by the way, all these scriptures are on your sermon note cards on the back of the piece you were given as you came in, so you'll have those. And then Romans 12:18. "If it is possible, so far as it depends on you, be at peace with all people. Be peaceable with all." If you can stand your ground as a Christ follower, besides someone of another faith, and love them and care for them and pray for them, and watch for opportunities to share with them, then please do so. See, what we have to watch for is the merge of our rights and our responsibilities. Watch these. When they come together, these things, when they merge together, you've got a zone where those two overlap. Okay, rights and responsibilities. Where they overlap is where we live as Christ followers. And I want to talk to you very briefly about what we call the Mars Hill concept. Now, there was a gentleman in the New Testament who wrote most of the books of the New Testament named Paul. Paul had a name before Paul. He was named Saul. Saul was raised as a Jew. Specifically, he was raised as a Jewish lawyer. And he was also, not only was he a Jew, a Jewish lawyer, he was a Roman citizen who became a Christ follower. And Paul became very good at talking to people about Jesus. We see him at a place called Mars Hill, or called the Areopagus in Scripture, where he's sharing with people about the good news of Jesus Christ, where he exercises his rights as a Roman citizen, his knowledge as a Jew, his knowledge as a Jewish lawyer, and his Christianity. He merges them all together to talk to people about his faith. Christian students, this is what we need you to do. To be ready to share about your faith, to be ready to tell others why you believe in Jesus, and to do it gently and with respect and with humility. The days of just yelling at people and telling them they got to believe in Jesus or else are over. It's not going to work. They're not listening anymore. But I tell you what does work is if you'll pick up a conversation with somebody, if you'll sit with them, you'll learn from them, and you'll share with them gently, respectfully about why you believe in Jesus Christ, I believe we can win the day. But Christians, it also means, and adults too, you can't just run from conversations. You can't just hide from the culture. We have to engage, and we have to be a part. Let's look at what Paul did there as an early follower of Jesus. In Acts 17, 22 through 31, this is how Paul addresses the topic. So Paul, standing in the midst of the Areopagus, a place called Mars Hill, he said, "Men of Athens, I perceive that in every way you are very religious. For as I passed along and observed the objects of your worship, I found also an altar with this inscription, 'To the unknown God.' What therefore you worship is unknown, this I proclaim to you." Here's the basic idea of the Mars Hill concept. Start where people are. Start with what they do know. And begin to talk to them about Jesus. Humbly, boldly, with some knowledge, study and get ready. Do these things. And yet be bold. So it's this mix between being humble and bold at the same time. And having these conversations. Students, does this make sense? That at your lunchroom on Tuesday, someone could tell you, "Well, you can't talk about God." Well, how will you respond? What would you say to them? One of you students, give me an answer. Alex, what would you say back? Say again now. Yeah, that you have freedom of speech and you can still talk about God. Yeah, that's right, Alex. And students, if you'll get that with me today, then I'll be really happy that when you leave. Parents, if you'll know your students have rights in the public school, and they'll do that. But if we'll all use this Mars Hill concept to enter into discussions with people that we love. You know, I brought this mug to remind us this is another principle of Phos Community Church and how we operate. We want to go into culture and start relationships and have conversations. I believe in the power of a great conversation, maybe over a cup of coffee, with someone who doesn't believe like you do. And in winning people to Christ, one person at a time, by loving them into the kingdom of God, by serving our way into influence, by engaging with the culture and not shrinking back. And if we all did that as Christ followers, imagine what would happen in this culture. Parents, adults, grandparents, students, what would happen in this community if we all lovingly had conversations about Jesus when we could? Would it change some things? You see, instead of that student standing and talking about there is no God, maybe in a year or so he would retract his statement and have a whole different type of talk if we can engage him and talk with him at that level. But I want you to know this. We'll never totally be at peace with culture. 1 Corinthians 1:18. Let's look at this, an important scripture. For people who are stumbling toward ruin, the message of the cross is nothing but a tall tale for fools by a fool. But for those of us who are already experiencing the reality of being rescued and made right, it is nothing short of God's power. It's nothing short of God's power. That this work that the Holy Spirit wants to do, and when you have these conversations, not everybody's going to see it like you do. Even if you state your case simply and boldly, humbly, they're still not going to believe like you do. Is that okay? Yes or no? Can you still love them? Yep. Can you still care for them? Yep. Can you still be friends with them? Yes. Do what? And don't give up on them. Keep praying. Keep praying. Stay in there. Leanne's been a public school teacher for a long time now. This is about it for her, she tells me. And yet, for year after year, I know she's had chances to share Jesus with students who just wanted to know. And so let's stand our ground, gently and powerfully. How about that? Could we do that? Yeah? Does it help a little bit to know what your rights are? Give it up if you're ready to go on this.